the darkest timeline, paradise, and a destructive intergalactic space worm. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the To Baldly Go podcast. Thank you for joining us on our mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to baldly go where so many have gone before. My name is Aaron, and I am on my first voyage through the universe of Star Trek, watching a few episodes each week and discussing them with my wife Abbie and our friend Nate. This week we discuss the next 3 episodes of Star Trek the Original Series, Season 2, Mirror Mirror, The Apple, and the Doomsday Machine. And with that, ahead, Warp Factor 2. First episode, Mirror Mirror. Yeah, I thought this was a really good episode. I could go 7 or 8 on it, kind of leaning 7. I know it's really highly rated on like IMDb and just generally considered a top episode. I thought it was plenty good. Or kind of your thoughts on ranking or rating and anything like that?
Yeah, I agree. This is another.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I'll give it a 7, 7.5, maybe, I guess. I mean, I didn't take notes also while watching. I just watched it and I found entertainment value in just actually watching the episode. It was entertaining in a very Star Trek way. The alternate universe, it's got the characters trying to figure out what's going on, and I feel like they picked up on what was going on a lot faster than other episodes where they were kind of dumb about what was happening with alternate realities or, split personalities, that kind of thing. So I do think it did a pretty good job. I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I thought it was a good episode. I see on IMDb it's rated a 9, which I don't think it didn't blow me away. But it was there wasn't really anything to dislike about the episode. I thought it was fine. Yeah, it was good.
I don't think it's a 9 by any means. I also give it a 7. I thought it was good. It sets up some major plot points that come back later, which is kind of fun. But it wasn't my favorite, right? I think it had some interesting messages. There was some cool stuff in there. I don't think it's a 9 by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm gonna stick to my 7 on that one. I had the same thought as you did, Aaron. It's like 7, maybe an 8, but I couldn't quite get myself to that.
I feel like I could be persuaded this episode was great. I think I'd be hard pressed to call it amazing, which would be like the 9. But I thought it was good. I thought it was fun. It's fun seeing the characters acting in different ways. Now we've seen evil Kirk before, but we hadn't really seen evil Spock. So him getting the goatee and that signifying evil, just like with Abed in Community in the Darkest Timeline, he's got the same Spock evil goatee there. But yeah, I thought it was just good. It was fun seeing that different spin on it with the parallel or mirrored universe. How they signified that early on with the Enterprise coming in from the left and then the right and then the left and the right and doing that.
I do think it's interesting that again we see this parallel universe type theme.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that before in what episode was that? Why can't I remember?
I mean, the Enemy Within had a little bit of that. It wasn't the parallel universe per se, but it was.
What was the 2 guys that?
Yeah, that not very good episode.
Was that parallel or was that just multi-dimensional? I guess.
They referred to it as parallel universes that merged. I mean, they specifically talked about parallel universes that come together and then split apart again, and how they were jumping the gap between them. This, I think, is
the alternative factor.
That's what it was. This is maybe a little different.
I think actually, which is interesting because we didn't really like that one very much as far as I recall. but this one we liked far better. So I do like that they're improving within themes. They realized they had something there, but they just didn't quite capitalize on it, or didn't quite, I think what Aaron's word was on that one, he didn't quite hit home. Like, had a good theme, like a lot of potential, but then just kind of fell flat. Whereas this one, they were able to kind of take those key concepts that you're just like, this is intriguing, and then take out all of the pieces of it where it was just like, we don't like that part.
Yep.
So I think they really did do a good job encompassing everything. They had some awesome, I don't know, it was just kind of cool. And I think it played out how I would kind of anticipate if Star Trek was real, how that would have played out. You would have beamed in and been like, kind of awkward at first, but then your captain catches on quickly and was just like, shut up. We're going to play this cool. Play it cool, dudes. Right. It's weird. Just shut up. We'll talk about it later. Like, I feel like I found them very realistic how they portrayed that. And then even down to, Kirk talking to Uhura, like, you're the only one who can do this. You can do it. Go and pretend. I'll be right behind you supporting. You know what I mean? Right. So very much how I'd expect those kind of things to play out in a current drama. Very, very, accurate portrayals of human reactions.
And Uhura does awesome. Like, once she gets up to the bridge and she has to play that part, like, she figures it out real quick, and she's stringing Sulu along and just maybe having a little too much fun doing that in the process. But
we're back to the Sulu Uhura like flirting thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. I never realized that before, but we kind of have this like underlying thing of Sulu kind of going after Uhura.
Mm-hmm. Makes you wonder,
I don't know. Is that super cliche at that time? Like, I know, but like, was that a thing? Like, that had to have been a thing then, right? That's still considered kind of an atypical thing. Like, we talk like we're good about biracial things and intermixing, but normally it's like white with black, white with Asian, like not Asian with black. So I'd imagine at that time it had to be even weirder.
Yeah.
Or even more of a like noticeable thing.
I am curious to know what the cultural opinion would be of that at that time, right? Was that more acceptable? Was that less acceptable? Like,
yeah, I'm just curious on that because it's kind of a theme they keep going.
Yeah. But I like on some level that they also do that because they push those boundaries and they say, this is okay. It doesn't matter, where you're from, that, anyone can be in a relationship with another person. It doesn't matter what they look like or anything like that. So it kind of goes back to that whole, Gene Roddenberry's idealistic view of the future and that kind of thing, that even in the mirror universe, that's okay.
So,
and I'll say this for Aaron on that regard, like anything goes and how edgy Star Trek is. Like, Gene really set that up to be something that shows through in every season of every show. And the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, that's really bold. And I feel like I've thought that in every series. Most recently, right now, I've picked back up on Discovery again. And so I'm watching through that. And I was just like, and I was doing some, research behind the scenes on that piece of it. And they actually had the first openly binary actor, like openly disclosed that. And I was like, people might be offended by that, but at this point, we've had Star Trek saying for 40, almost 60 years that they're edgy and that they are like, they give no craps about any of that and your opinions on it. So watch it or don't want it, but they're going to put it out there as what's accurate for reality right now. So I do find it fun that Star Trek remains true to itself like that and the values that it has of just being real.
That's always been my challenge with
the time.
With people who say that the newer Star Trek stuff is too progressive. And my pushback is, are you aware of how progressive this show was when it originally aired? Like,
which is really ironic today.
It's always pushed an agenda.
Yeah.
But I find that kind of ironic today, more so in the next episode that we'll talk about, with some of the things they say in that one. It's like that would be considered insanely like regressive today. So yeah, it is interesting.
I almost think they do that on purpose. Like insanely like progressive episode followed by insanely regressive episode. It's almost like they're backpedaling a little bit, like, oh, we were a little too honest on that one and maybe too open and honest with everybody that now we offended some people. So let's pedal it back and throw some like not so subtle insults.
I would love
there.
to know if that's true or not, because I do see your point there, but I also just think sometimes they're really bad episodes. And not to tip my hand too much for the next episode, but sometimes they're just really bad episodes.
That's true.
They really are.
I would think, though, while they were very progressive, they had what they still had a base of what today we might refer to as a lot of traditional values or views.
Sure.
While they did have a lot that was progressive for the time, and clearly that continues all throughout the other series, which is something that I've heard for a long time. And yeah, it's interesting to be seeing these for the first time in 2023 and then seeing like, okay, I can tell this is wildly progressive for the time, yet they're still embracing some of these, say, more traditional values that maybe are less, are definitely the antithesis of progressive as it may seem today. But we can get into that more in the next episode too.
Yeah.
I thought
to talk about.
I do think that this one was very progressive, though. On more, I mean, we're talking about who we're at right now, and Sulu is what we started this at. But didn't Kirk later say to his live-in lady that, like, she was saying something about how, what if she became a captain? What if she did this and this and this? And he said something along the lines of, "What if you do?" Meaning only you can do whatever you set your mind to, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Remarkably progressive comment, even from the captain, when he's actually said some pretty like, that chick's hormones are going crazy again. Why is she on my away mission? You know, he's, that character itself does say a lot of things like that, where it's like even down to demeaning for even other people. He's not above using people, things like that. So to have that open honesty with someone is kind of interesting. And I'm curious if they think that open honesty like that is him trying to be the dark side. Is that like that rawness that allows him to, like, is that too grunge? Is that why he doesn't do that in the real world, but he's only doing it in the mirror world? I don't know. Just thought that one.
So I thought there were. Oh,
no, go ahead. You've been
trying to make mine's kind of shifting topic. So scratch that.
I don't know. I don't know what I was going to finish that line of thought with, so I'm just going to shut up. And you've been trying to make a point for like 5 minutes, so I'll let you make a point.
It's like this is about Aaron.
No, I kind of shifting the thoughts. I think it's interesting. A lot of times when you think of like a parallel universe, you're thinking of everything going the exact same up until that point of the transporter malfunction or something else. Kind of like we saw with The Enemy Within, where the transporter malfunctioned and now we split and got the two Kirks, or Kirk, two half Kirks coming through. So here they've essentially got whatever in their respective histories with the Federation side and the Empire Nazi side, with their nice Nazi salutes and all of that. We've got them, their respective histories for all of time, coming to meet at this exact space, this exact moment, and then both having this exact same malfunction simultaneously to kick them into the other universe, which I find interesting. I mean, you just buy into it when you're watching the episode, but even thinking in terms of those parallel universes, whatever, and even then to get out of it, they had to have everything resolved on both sides at the exact same time to make it all work. So that's something that came to mind. I don't let that really detract from the episode, given the theory of parallel universes I've read up on.
But so I'm with you, and I had not thought about it like that. I I had pictured it as there is some schism much earlier in the timeline that led them to go in these different directions. I hadn't thought about the
Even
crossover.
still, even still, if it had
But
broken some point earlier, for them to come back at exactly that space and moment, otherwise it wouldn't have gone in that way.
but the
Which,
theory of parallel universes is there are an infinite number of them.
yep, so it
And
would have to have happened in one.
yeah, so the probability is very, 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 very tiny, but it's not zero.
Well, the probability of them mirroring that exact universe is very minuscule, but the probability of them mirroring a universe in exactly that way is
Yep,
one.
fair.
So
Now the question is, did they actually go back to their universe?
that's like we discussed in the was that the time travel back to the 60s,
Yep.
or did they just go back to the universe where they had left and then came back, but then actually one of the universes they're just gone forever?
Yeah, and it forked, and maybe there's
Yep.
one where it didn't work and they're trapped in the mirror universe, and there's one where the mirror Kirk and all that are trapped in the real unit. Like, there's so many different possibilities, and the theory of parallel universes says that they're all true. All of these.
Yeah. I did like, I thought there were some interesting things. Like I liked when McCoy asked, what kind of people are we in this universe? But at the same time, is that you? Because clearly different experiences, different decisions, everything is wildly different. So even if they look like you and have the exact same name, even the same DNA, is that you? So again, kind of the discussion of the impacts of parallel universes and where they diverge and where they then, the people in them become different.
And how much of you is, your DNA versus your experience, right?
Yes. I imagine one of the most shocking things for that crew was the capacity that they actually had for cruelty and for that darkness like that, because they are the exact same biological genetics. So like Nate was bringing up, it's that identity piece that really pulled out who they were. And really interesting that just your environment can really change to be a completely different person with the exact same genetics. So I imagine identity crisis after the fact of, wow, am I really that dark inside? What is the real me? Have I just hid that my entire life? That kind of thing. I'd imagine the entire, that crew probably has some real identity crises happening, or crises happening afterwards. And to speak to your previous point, all I kept thinking when Aaron said that, well, we don't know if they went back to the right one, but they think they went right back to the correct universe. They're just experiencing a whole bunch of Mandela effects, and they don't know what's real or not, or what's the reset. They remember Berenstain Bears in their history books, and it's not showing up for them now. So
they're just on their way to the Dark Tower. But I did like though how they did tie it all back together and had those similarities there. Like I wrote a note at one point that I couldn't tell if Kirk just wanted to get back to his universe and his ship, or if he wanted to change that parallel mirror group, which became very evident at the end. Granted, he needed evil Spock to help him out to get back, but he was trying to affect change for the better on the evil side of things. And I liked at the end where he said, however, that Jim Kirk will find a few changes if I read my Spocks correctly. So I thought that was a fun line to comparing and contrasting the two, but also the similarity, the sameness between the two Spocks. Even though they were somewhat different, they still had that same base or that same core, and those values that were going to come through. And just how he tried to logic his way to evil Spock and basically saying it's illogical for you to tie yourself to something that has no chance of surviving. It's like that's illogical. That's completely antithetical to what you stand for. I thought they did go a bit, I think, a bit overt in what they clearly made the evil side. They were money hungry, profit greedy, they wanted power, all of these things. They made that very overt.
Very heavy-handed with that.
They were rather heavy-handed.
Down to references about how Kirk killed Pike in order to take command of the Enterprise.
Yeah,
which is
and
still kind of a neat reference, but yeah.
And that was interesting that they and how they showed. I mean, even with Chekhov, with him in the lift tube or whatever that's called, turbo lift. Lift tube. That's from Star Wars.
Tube.
That's from Star Wars.
Okay, that's the title of this episode. It's the lift tube.
No, the title of this episode comes from the Apple. We talked about that.
That's true. We did find a good one in that one.
Oh, I can't wait.
But the Apple was very problematical.
It had moments. It was all about everyone was playing these power games and everything was a scheme that was to gain power or money or anything like that. Interesting that Kirk was evil Kirk was clearly somebody very formidable, because they were like, how many people have just disappeared because you said to? 50, 100. I mean, anyone who goes against him just goes away.
Even the girlfriend said something about that, like when he got jumped outside the turbo lift. She's like, what's going on? Why are you off your game today? Can't believe you let that happen.
Well, and she also said it was like kissing a stranger.
I missed that.
Yeah, so when they were in his quarters and she goes in for a kiss, and he leans into it because number one, it's Kirk, and number two, he knows that he has to try and make sure that everyone thinks he is that Kirk. She pulls back and literally says, it's like kissing a stranger. So she had him figured out basically from the moment he walked into his quarters. Like, she knew him so well that it's like, something's wrong here. And Spock wasn't that far behind.
Yeah. I thought a couple other just kind of random thoughts I had is that for being so like savage and brutal of a society, everyone was really shitty at fighting, except for Spock's horrifically bad stunt double. Like that was really tilting for how like, and none of the close-up shots could you see. I mean, because they had Leonard Nimoy in there for those shots, but whoever they had for his stunt double, it pulled me right out of the episode. I thought it was really bad.
I think that's the problem with the remasters, though, because you see a much higher
and watching it, we were watching it on a 70-inch TV, so I mean, yeah. But I mean, that's being nitpicky on it. But yeah, everybody was really, like, for being so savage, terrible at fighting. So maybe we can understand why Sulu had that ridiculous scar on his face, because he was so bad at fighting. Really only Spock was able to fight back. And even then, he got overpowered. A couple other thoughts I had.
If Sulu had his saber, he would have been a lot better. But
well, yeah. And yeah, shirtless.
Go back to the best episode.
Now I noticed a uniform change in this one that I don't like. I know people can look at the uniforms they're wearing and say, oh, this is their rank, and I've got no idea how that goes at this point, but I noticed that Kirk's insignia was like sideways and at his waist, and now he was wearing some green like tunic instead of the yellow just shirt. So I just made note of that, even
yellow
though I
is
don't
command
know.
colors.
Okay, then what's green?
So I'm double checking this right now. Hang on, I'm just making sure I get my facts right here. Can you just give me like a TLDR So they did see it for the first time in The Enemy Within. So this is not the first time we've seen it. It was
I just figured that was because they needed a shirt that could be ripped open.
So it was designed to help viewers tell him apart from his twisted doppelganger. But what I'm seeing, just casually looking, was that he was always supposed to wear green and the yellow was a mistake. Now, I have heard, and maybe this is where I have it backwards.
How is that how do you make a mistake like that? Is it like the blind person or the colorblind person is the one who's like doing costumes, or how do you, I wore purple today on accident?
Because even his original costume was actually avocado green, but the lighting in the film made it look yellow, which is the opposite of what I remembered. I thought that his tunic was actually yellow, but because of the lighting, it made it look green. But I was close.
Interesting.
So they actually show a side.
Wait, so when was it actually green?
So we first started like seeing that green.
So it's been green this entire time?
Yeah, his yellow shirt is avocado green. And so this article has a side by side of him wearing the shirt, but then in a museum with proper lighting and a proper camera, and it is not that color. It's not gold. It is
no way.
Yellow.
So this green. Is the dress blue or yellow kind of deal.
Yeah. So the green tunic is more of a pronounced green than the avocado whatever.
I don't think Aaron understands the importance of it. Like they literally have built like actual like designations off of the colors of these uniforms.
I know,
like command yellow with
I don't know red. What they are, but I know they're there.
Engineering is red.
Yep, engineering is red.
Medical science are blue. What's secure? So security and engineering are the same.
Yeah. Well, so in the original series, that goes back and forth. Sometimes it's yellow, sometimes it's red. They're not very consistent about that. They don't really nail that down until Next Generation.
Even then, I feel like they flip flop because Geordi wears yellow.
But the yellow is engineering and operations and security.
Oh, it's red then.
Command.
I thought red was people who die.
Oh.
And Uhura.
Command and Next Generation aren't allowed to go on away missions, so that's why they don't die.
Yeah, pretty much.
They changed the rules.
Probably because, let's be real.
I don't think they taught the same hand-to-hand fighting in the next generations as they did for Kirk and Spock and that whole crew. They kicked butt.
Yeah.
In this episode when they had to. Do you see that? Like they took out all of their people. Like they're doing kicks, and I liked it. I mean, I know it took Aaron out of it because of the stunt doubles, but it was like good on them. Every one of them.
That took me out of it a little bit. What I really noted was that the only one in this like completely savage, barbaric society, the only one who was capable of putting up a fight was Spock. The rest got just beat effortlessly. Like Sulu walked in and they were just like, "You're done." And he was like knocked out with nothing.
So you're right, but I also wonder how much of that is because there was a line in there where someone threatened Spock, and he goes, "My operatives would avenge my death, and some of them are Vulcans." Like it's almost this: Vulcans are a step up from everyone else in terms of how violent they are.
Yeah. But so my point is the civilized people showed up and kicked the shit out of all these savages who couldn't fight like at all, which I just found ironic considering they were these savage, like barbaric side of things. But then they may all have been just all talk.
But I can buy that Spock is more violent.
Absolutely. I mean, you've seen how he like with just the flick of a wrist knocks Kirk across the room when they fought in a different episode. So I wasn't saying anything about how Spock was like strangely competent in fighting. I thought it was interesting how uncompetent or incompetent everyone else was in fighting for how savage they were.
Okay.
As always, the kind of closeout scene was pretty great. I liked when Kirk turned to McCoy and says, "I'm not sure, but I think we've been insulted." And McCoy just says, "I'm sure."
Yeah, that was a great line.
I thought that was pretty good. And then the last thought I had from this episode was, okay, so what happened with the dilithium crystals? That's kind of what set this all off. And I guess in part, Kirk was just like, fine, we're not going to take them from you. And then he did maybe convince Spock not to do stuff, but I would imagine the other crew got there and was just like, why the hell haven't you destroyed this planet yet? Let's go get us some crystals.
Yeah.
And then destroyed those other people. So, I mean, Kirk just had to get back to his, and let's just forget about all the people.
We'll forget about that.
Let's forget about the planets and the societies that die in his wake.
He planted a seed in Spock's mind that, Spock's going to start this massive revolution in that universe. And
yes,
that's collateral damage at that point.
Yep.
So
because in every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Yes, indeed. I also liked it's far easier for you as civilized men to behave like barbarians than it was for them as barbarians to behave like civilized men, which I think is an interesting. Is it easier to pretend to go backwards than it is to pretend to go forwards? I believe that, right?
Yeah. Because if you knew what forward looked like, you'd already be there. Same idea with inventions or innovations of the future. If we knew what they were, we would have them.
Or just good behavior. We don't teach our children to have temper. I mean, same reason we teach our children to not have temper tantrums, right? And act aggressively. It takes training and time to have control over those emotions. And essentially, the mirror universe had just aggression.
Yeah. And then, because if everybody else does, what are you going to do? If you sit back, you die. So then you don't get to push forward with your peaceful hopes.
And then the closing scene is fantastic as always.
Yeah, right? It was great.
Met her before? Why do you ask? Your reaction, one of recognition? Oh no, we haven't met before. She just seemed like a nice, likable girl. It seemed like we could be friends. Like, oh man. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I still think while I even have really enjoyed talking about it and could see it being an 8, I still just think it was a good episode. There wasn't anything particularly bad in it. There were some things, but I put most of that to the time. And like you said, we're watching remastered versions of a show from 50 plus years ago and watching them on gigantic TVs that they didn't even fathom at that time. So what took me out of the episode is so minimal, but just kind of fun to talk about and laugh about. But all in all, I thought it was a really good episode. Yeah, very enjoyable. On to not as good of an episode.
Do you want to do Chat GPT?
Yeah. Let's do Chat GPT.
Because I think these are actually kind of interesting. So number 1 is nature versus nurture. One of the central themes is the idea of nature versus nurture. The episode explores the question of whether individuals are shaped primarily by their inherent nature or by the environment in which they are raised, which we, talked about early on in this. The mirror universe serves as a
nailed it.
Boom.
Now, did we really talk about if that's nature versus nurture? Because it seemed like they were both nurtured very differently to get them to where they were.
I think the title could be wrong, but the concept is still correct.
Maybe.
I don't know. Chat GPT is incorrect sometimes. So moral relativism raises the question of moral relativism by presenting a universe where the familiar characters of the Starship Enterprise are portrayed as ruthless and amoral counterparts. The episode challenges the notion of absolute moral values, suggesting that what is considered good or evil can vary depending on the circumstances and the society in which one exists.
That's interesting. That's an interesting one.
So
were they actually evil? Or were we just setting our standards of morality on them?
If what they were doing was considered acceptable, and
all of your friends say to jump off of a bridge.
Right. But the idea of morals and ethics and again, the progressiveness of Star Trek, how things change over time.
Mhm.
I thought it more in terms of like Prime Directive, even where it's like they're almost like a separate culture at this point.
Yeah.
Like, do they have a right to judge another culture's
I mean, that's a great point too.
growth and development?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certain within that hierarchy, yes, it's twisted and whatnot, but it sounds like they even have rules about how they're going about it. Like I mean, known norms. You murder the person ahead of you in order to take control there, and I mean, yes, it's a horrible way to exist from our perspective on things, but if that's all they've ever known and what they want to know, it's a very interesting concept of, do we have the right to judge them as an outside force?
Yep.
So I guess kind of another thought on that's just interesting to consider. In this mirror universe, it wasn't everybody who was evil. I mean, the Hawkins were still like utter and complete pacifists who were willing to die rather than voluntarily give up something that could be used for violence. So they were no different in either universe. They were the exact same.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's, I don't know, it's kind of a cool concept to think about, right?
Yeah.
So the next one is the danger of absolute power. It also explores the dangers of absolute power and the corrupting influence it can have on individuals and societies. In the mirror universe, the Terran Empire is characterized by violence, treachery, and oppression, as power is consolidated in the hands of a few ruthless individuals. The episode serves as a cautionary tale about the potential consequences of unchecked power and the importance of maintaining balance and accountability. Do we think we really hit on that? I think that one's a stretch.
I don't know. I think that one is a bit of a stretch because
what was there really?
I don't think any of their power was unchecked. They were constantly being checked, even though the evil Kirk apparently passed all of those checks. I think if he got rid of 100 challengers to his power, I mean, it's not like he was being very good at ruling, or at least not dying. But that doesn't mean that his power was unchecked. It seems like it was checked constantly.
And there was a system in place, right? Yeah. And I assume,
as barbaric as it might be, there was a system there was a system that everybody in that universe bought into.
Yep. And then the last one is self-reflection and personal growth. As the characters from the Prime universe find themselves in the mirror universe, they're confronted with distorted versions of themselves. This experience prompts self-reflection and highlights the potential for personal growth and change. The episode suggests that individuals have the capacity to choose their own path, and even in the face of a harsh environment, they can resist negative influences and strive for a better future. That's fairly true. I mean, even Kirk was trying to push for that, right?
Yeah. Then I wonder, was there really, aside from evil Spock, was there much like introspection? Because I mean, Kirk was looking at it saying like, damn, we're better than these people. Let's try to make them like us, and kind of getting them to go along, but getting the others to kind of take that same thing, go along by saying, hey, hide in plain sight. But I don't know if there was much introspection or like self-examination like that among the heroes of the story, aside from what Kirk was trying to do to like save the other side of things, or at least improve that by bringing evil Spock over to the good side.
Do you want to hear some interesting trivia on this one real quick?
I do.
Okay. So, as we noticed, the female characters actually had the midriff showing, which is against the rules at the time, and they got away with it because they filmed those scenes when the person was on lunch break.
So wait, was there a like?
There's a PA, there's like a standards representative who's there on set supposedly. So like, it's visible because they filmed that while he was on lunch. And actually, in 1966, they removed the prohibition from the standards, but it was already part of it and whatnot. So yeah, it was. Yeah. Laura has been seen many times with their midriff, and they've never risked it. Yeah.
that
I
there's
thought that was pretty good.
on set who has to like be okay with what's going on, and does that still exist today, or are there just accepted rules of, you don't
It
or whatever, right?
it
Depending.
was revoked in the late 1960s, it said. So it sounds like it was something that did go away.
That may have just been that rule. I think standards and practices are still a pretty standard practice in show business today, to make sure that they're not going to get in trouble with the FCC or whatever rules guide what they can or can't do.
I don't know if they just know the rules and they film around that, or if there's still a dedicated person or team of people that are on set.
I would guess it's probably a union gig, and if there's a possibility for that, then there would be somebody on set.
So you got to find this interesting. Now picture this entire episode off of the original script, the original outline.
Okay.
The Mirror Universe Federation is not evil. It's backwards in terms of technology, phaser weapons. Kirk is married to a nurse on a parallel enterprise. Spock is more Vulcan, not human. And McCoy's counterpart is bearded.
I don't like it. It sounds dumb.
How different. Like, I'm just imagining like this really like, idiocracy style starship.
Now, what we really need to think about is in the mirror universe of this actual universe, and the three of Not Us are sitting discussing, could you imagine if this episode, instead of being good and just a little bit backwards, they were just downright evil?
Yep. Some parallel universe, we love that concept, right?
Yeah.
Did anyone catch in the Mirror Universe? They wore their phasers on the other hip and upside down.
No.
Upside down.
I don't know if I can buy the upside down thing, but
upside down.
So,
and this is the first time, or the only time it says in the original series, where Scotty actually refers to Kirk as Jim.
Interesting.
He does it in the movies.
Yep.
He does not do it in the show any other time.
Huh.
So there ends my interesting. There's other facts and stuff like that, but not nearly as exciting as I think those ones were.
Okay. Let's move on to the episode we're all so excited to talk about.
So this episode was not good. But there were a number of points Abbie and I were like laughing out loud at some of the lines.
I agree.
I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about from this episode. It wasn't a good episode by any means. I gave it a 6 because I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was terrible compared to some of the episodes we've seen, but it wasn't good. And there were enough parts that I thought were like at least interesting to discuss or think about that I just said it was okay.
Okay. Abbie.
Not good. That look Abbie gave means.
I mean,
it was terrible. It had some, not only just having a horror, I will give Aaron this. They had some very interesting thoughts and different like theological things going on of, the morality of him killing their god, and do they have a right to judge a civilization for being as devoted as they were to an entity? Is that wrong in and of itself? And though they are stagnant, McCoy obviously was arguing that they're stagnant, it's not living. There's some lines about there, you have to grow to live, things like that. So they had some really good theological things like that, which could have been done without all the problematical, to quote Mr. Scott, all the problematical stuff that we had going on. Not included or limited to, we've got the pseudo blackface going on there, which was like, that's a little awkward. Like Polynesian blackface. Yeah, that was a little.
I just thought they were a bunch of Oompa Loompas.
Kinda. Again.
Well, yeah.
I think they look like Oompa Loompas only because of remastering, honestly. Like the caked on makeup that you can see with the updated screens that are bigger. I'm sure it looked far more realistic on the green. Like when everything looks grainy. I think they could have done a better job with the deity versus having it be like this really awkward stone thing. I found that stupid. And just they didn't ever explain any of it. They left it there of, is this actually a deity? Was this another alien that they're worshiping? Is this a, another computer that, Kirk is going to just break?
Andrew all over
is
again.
their god?
Yeah.
Exactly. It had definitely that feel to it. And then these genuine people. Now, the only reason I didn't rate a 1 is because they had 1 or 2 really funny lines on it, like the awkward lines about, well, how are they going to do that? And they all just like, yeah, Spock, tell the lady how they're going to do that. Or my favorite line of the whole thing, honestly, was at the very end. He's like, children? What are children? He's like, just keep doing what you're doing. You'll find out soon. He's just going to let him go.
All really great lines.
I
that
thought
was
the best,
not my favorite line.
The best line was when they basically said, "Oh, the touching, that's not allowed." And McCoy said, "Well, there goes paradise."
Yeah. That was maybe my second favorite line. I think my favorite line was when Kirk looked at Chekhov and the woman that he was with and says, "We're not here to conduct a field experiment in human biology," because they were going to go off into the forest and do some experiments. And that was really, I laughed out loud very hard at that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I found we were both laughing quite a bit through the episode, which doesn't necessarily mean it was good.
We were laughing at it, not with it.
Fair enough, but I think some of it was a little laughing with it. But still, it made it like, at one point you turned to me and said, like, this episode feels really long, and I agreed. It being not a particularly good episode, it did feel pretty long. But it had enough laugh out loud moments that I was like, okay, it was mildly enjoyable.
I erred more towards Aaron than Abbie. I gave it a 5. I didn't think it was absolutely awful. It was not great.
No.
But I think the copious amount of lines I just thought were really funny, coupled with the very loose kind of philosophical messages that they were weaving in there, was enough to at least elevate it a little bit. I struggled. I looked at the rating definitions for probably like 5 minutes when I finished the episode. Like, where do I really like? I know it wasn't a 6 or better. Like, was it mediocre? Was it bad? Was it awful? I didn't think it was awful. I didn't think it was painful. So it was like, is it bad or mediocre?
Are you sure?
It's mediocre.
I think you should rewatch it. It was pretty painful.
I think I've seen worse.
Yeah, I think we've seen.
Who Mourns for Adonias was much worse.
That's fair.
Yes.
But you also rated that one less than this one, Abbie.
So was the alternative factor. I think I gave that one that one was also terrible. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I'm sticking with the 5. But it wasn't a good episode.
No.
Like, let's just, get that out there.
Yeah. I thought, like, there were a lot of things that just didn't quite fit, though it kind of did. I mean, it seems like they just kind of threw away the prime directive on this one of to not interfere, but the way they set up those rules previously, it's don't interfere with a growing society. So this was stagnant. They were saying nothing has changed in they had no idea how long, at least 10,000 years. So nothing has changed. So they're stagnant. And then I think also if they are in jeopardy, like self-defense rules come into play, I would imagine with the prime directive, and they were holding the ship there and blocking teleportation. So they wanted to leave, but they weren't able to. So they had no choice in that regard other than to fight back against what they were doing. Although this one felt like it took a bunch of pieces from a bunch of episodes we've already seen and threw them all together into one. I mean, we have another episode here where they come in, they blow a bunch of shit up, and then they're just like, well, now you're free. Yep. We're out. And then they just
good luck to you.
When really, like, if you think about it, they're talking about this as they were removed from paradise, like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and it's like, okay, but you're kind of leaving out that that was an inherent death sentence. So these people who were living for tens of thousands of years potentially, like, you're just like,
Well,
hey, now you can experience normal life and wait for the big surprise at the end.
yeah,
That they were just kind of like, what do you, we don't need replacements. So it's interesting. I thought it was interesting to see. It felt like Spock and McCoy almost reversed roles from similar scenarios or situations in other episodes, where it feels like McCoy is always the one who's like, no, just let them live or let them be. And he was the one advocating, like, we got to do something here. And Spock was just like, they're happy, they're doing their thing, let them be.
yeah.
Which I can't pinpoint why I felt that was a kind of role reversal, but it just felt like McCoy was often the one taking more of that passive stance,
Yeah.
where in this one he was overtly like, we got to get involved here and do something about this. So I thought that was just another interesting thing I noted. Yeah, I have a note about experiencing normal
I
life.
think,
Hmm.
can I comment on your
Yeah.
just comment about McCoy? That's
Yeah.
because McCoy is a horn dog, and he just found out that they aren't doing it.
The dirty old man.
He's like,
That's fair.
he's like, seriously, no one should live like this. That's an existence. That's not fair. We have to change them.
I think the
I
only
say that as a joke, but I kind of actually think that's the case.
for sure.
Which then would explain why Spock is just like, they're good.
I think the only philosophical message that I found really interesting about this episode, because I think they were trying to do a lot of different things and failing miserably on just about every level.
Most of them. Yeah.
But I think the only one that I thought was kind of interesting that they really could have leaned more into and really wrap the discussion around is, what is the definition of paradise?
Yeah.
Because for them, the definition of paradise is you have every need is taken care of. Vol has you covered. You do his bidding. You have food. You have no illness. There's no death. There's no violence. You just live in peace. And the definition that it seemed like, especially McCoy, but McCoy and Kirk and the others is that there is this essence of pleasure that comes with paradise, and you can define pleasure however you want to, but they saw a society that was devoid of that, and so therefore it couldn't be paradise. But who's to say, right?
Yeah.
There was no conflict, there was no want, there was no nothing. Is that paradise?
Yeah.
It's an
So
interesting
I'm going to take this
question.
the other way
Yeah.
and think that it's more than just about paradise and talk about the line of freedom. You're not alive unless you're free, I think
Yeah.
is one of the lines that they gave within this. And then bringing it back to what's going on in 1969 in that time frame and kind of pushing that agenda a little bit of, there's that sacrifice now of you're going to age, you're going to die, but it's better to have those things and lose that fake paradise than to be mindless drones and just feeding a bigger cause that you don't understand or have any freedom understanding of.
Were they not?
So I think their argument was they weren't free because they had to follow this one big community. Think communism almost, kind of thoughts on that, like
but
all
also,
greater good.
I read that
And
less. I read that less as communism, and I saw this entire episode as being just incredibly anti-religion.
Yeah, I thought
mean,
it was
they talked,
Yeah,
they
but-
referenced the Bible and the Genesis story, but I thought this was very, very anti-religion just in general, where it was basically the way they described the feeders of Vol was essentially religious people, and they made it seem like religion is for primitive folk who don't know anything. I don't even want to say they don't know any better, because they really made it seem like these people don't know a damn thing. And that's kind of the vibe I got from the episode. And yeah, just I felt the episode was just a very anti-religion commentary.
That's what I got
They're
out of it.
primitive, and not just that, it was their responsibility to enlighten those people.
Mhm. Well, even at the
Of
end,
their
I mean, the analogy at the end was that they not only drove these people out of paradise, out of Eden, they cast Spock as Satan. Like,
I think that
that
though,
was really funny, but
I think that was a tie-in to some of the early critiques that people had about the series, was that Spock looked too much like Satan.
yeah.
Because that was something I think I read about after they did The Cage, when they decided to keep Spock as the number one over number one, was like, what people didn't like was that he looked too Satan-y.
Hmm.
Um,
And I do
and
think
so
it
I
was
think that
to
was
that,
kind of the joke
but
there, where they were kind of poking fun at that,
it's
and just use
interesting
that
that they picked
opportunity.
this episode to make that reference.
Yeah.
I think this was definitely a commentary on not just religion, but Christianity and
Yes.
blind obedience to Christianity. And
Yep.
that cat's tail is just like, could it be more straight up?
Had a few other random kind of thoughts on this episode.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess kind of building off of what we were saying before, they I feel like they kind of glossed over a little bit of the ramifications of what they did on this planet, where they just say, "Oh yeah, they got the knowledge of good and evil, but then they were driven out of paradise." And it's just like, I think the results are a bit more drastic than that, and they just gloss right over it, which, so be it. Again, they tried to do a lot in this episode, and I think a lot of things they did not do particularly well.
I think they could have
Um,
had a better episode if they had not tried to do so much. And we see that a
yeah,
lot. Like the episodes that we really don't like is where they try and cram a whole bunch of stuff in there
yeah,
and they don't do any of it well, or they're, as Spock says, very problematical.
yeah, yeah. So like, they I think they just tried to do too much, because in the one side, they're talking about basically building things for yourselves, thinking for yourselves, not just being some drone feeding the machine. And you're doing these things and creating and enjoying freedom, but at the same time, if that's being then imposed on them, is that really freedom at all? Instead of them, choosing it. But yeah, there were a lot of things that they tried to do too much, I think, like you said, and just didn't necessarily succeed. There were enough points that I thought that made me laugh and made it like, there were enough enjoyable points in the episode that that's why I gave it a 6 and gave it a solid okay. Um, but yeah, I kind of liked some of the dialogue at the end, where you've got McCoy saying, "I don't agree with you at all, Mr. Spock," and Spock saying, "That's not unusual, Doctor." I mean, just having some of that.
Yeah.
Every time they said the name of the planet, because they had to say the full name every time, Gamma Trianguli 6, I kept thinking of Lur, the ruler of Omicron Persei 8 from Futurama. Um, and that's how he's always introduced, Lur, the ruler of Omicron Persei 8. So that's what I kept thinking every time they said the name of the planet.
Love it.
Um,
Did you guys catch that Vol is similar to Baal, the deity? That was deliberate. And even more fun, because this is the only trivia I really thought was interesting on this one. So the original script called for the ship's phasers to blow up the stone dinosaur of Vol. But the props department put so much work into creating the paper mache creature that they refused to allow its destruction.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
Don't wreck my paper mache.
Right? It's like a little kid, but we worked really hard on that.
So another thing that I didn't quite, it didn't feel quite right was Kirk's little meltdown partway through the episode about like, I have the option to disregard orders to keep my people safe. When he's very much about his crew over himself, but like so much is mission first, and these missions have inherent risk to them. And then Kirk had this moment where he was saying that he can disregard orders if they're too hazardous. And Spock was kind of the voice of reason, basically saying like, yeah, nobody ever said what we're doing is safe. And we know what we signed up for. And that he's done everything a commander should do. I mean, they had no reason to think anything was wrong until somebody died, and then they couldn't get off. So at the same time, he's kind of beating himself up over something where he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, you do see that introspection of him saying like, I made this choice. We came down here and wanted to walk in paradise, and now 3 of my people are dead. And my ship could be destroyed too, and that's 400 more people on my watch. But I didn't quite think that really fit for this situation.
And I see what you're saying, but I also would counter that by saying Kirk has a history of disregarding mission orders for this crew, despite the risk and despite the fact that there are known risks. And that's his MO. At the end of the day, his people are greater than the mission itself, and he will disobey any order if it means that he keeps his people safe. He was between a rock and a hard place because they were stuck, right?
Yeah.
Yet again, we have an episode where the transporters don't work. They're the most finicky technology on the planet. So he couldn't do anything about it, but
yeah,
he gladly would have. And that's
but then he's also, I think it's also him saying like, we never should have come here in the first place. It's just like, well, sure, hindsight's 2020, but given the information you had at the time, I kind of agree with Spock, where he's just like, you did what anybody would have done, and
and
there's danger inherent.
How many times have we all been in a situation where we've been like, boy, I wish I hadn't have done that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more than that for him. Kirk's got survivor's guilt at this point, and so it's literally a part of grief for his crew members. So I think Spock is being the logical, like, of course you can't know all these things. You're doing exactly what Starfleet told you to do and all of that, whereas Kirk is grieving for his dead people, and that's part of the process. I think that's very normal and very anticipated. I think that response is what anyone would have, even in command. They'd be like, why am I here? It's my fault. I should have made a better choice. And I think those are a few of the qualities that make the captains good, because they're reevaluating their choices. They don't do that same thing again. Potentially they can have a different outcome in a different situation, or same situation, different time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Is there anything noteworthy from ChatGPT, or should we just kick this episode and move on?
Oh boy, I'm not going to read them all. The paragraphs that put together. I think the first one is the critique of blind obedience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need to dig into that any further. I think we saw that and discussed that.
Yeah.
Pursuit of knowledge. The Apple explores the pursuit of knowledge and the importance of questioning authority. Again, I think it goes to that kind of anti-religious, blind obedience critique. The nature of freedom raises questions about the nature of freedom and the sacrifices required to achieve it. The inhabitants of Gamma Trianguli 6 live a seemingly idyllic existence protected by Vol and devoid of struggle or hardship. However, they lack freedom and individuality. The crew of the Enterprise must make sacrifices and challenge the status quo to liberate the people, emphasizing that freedom often requires taking risks and confronting oppressive systems. So it's the liberating thing that I struggle with a little bit, because I'm
going to impose this freedom on you and you're going to like it.
Yeah. I don't know that you can argue.
Wait, we have never done that in the history of America.
No,
that has never happened.
We've never
to any race or culture where we have decided that
that's
we
not
know
the
better
history of
on
America.
how
That's
they
the
should
history
run.
of humanity.
Yeah, that's fair.
But that's fair. But I'm just saying, it's not like we have direct examples we can be very much aware of within our own soil.
Yes, I don't know. I struggle with the concept that they weren't free. I don't know. It's just
but again, I guess that goes down to like how they were considered stagnant, and is it not the limitations that we experience in life that give life meaning? Yeah. With that being some of the argument.
Fair. And then the last one is the primal and civilized nature of humanity. It touches on the contrasting aspects of human nature, the primal and civilized. Vol's people live in a state of primitive bliss, free from suffering and fear. However, this existence denies them the opportunity for personal growth and the complexities that come with civilization. The episode suggests that while primal instinct for survival and simplicity may be tempting, it is through civilization, knowledge, and the pursuit of progress that humanity truly thrives. Again, were they not? What's your definition of thriving? Were they not thriving? Yes, they were not growing, but were they not thriving?
It's a little bit like I remember years ago seeing a poster at a Jimmy John's, and it said something. It told this parable along the lines of some guy, we'll just say investment banker, whatever, somebody works on Wall Street, went on vacation to some tiny village in Central America and saw somebody there, like a local fisherman there, and he was saying like, oh yeah, you got the life that I'm working to achieve, where you get up in the morning, when you wake up, you go out, you do some fishing, you come home, you take a nap, you go out, you do some more fishing, and then you spend the evening with your family and do all that. He's like, that's what I'm working so I can do that when I get old and retire. And the point being like, okay, so, or that guy has it right now. So it's like, what are they thriving for? Where the entire time they were talking about that place as though it were paradise. I'm just like, this is where we wish we could be. So yeah, it's kind of that, like, it starts at this like very primitive, idyllic type place. Then you progress, and then when you reach your peak, then you're just like, all right, we're good. Let's go relax by the lake or relax in our at camp. So yeah, kind of almost cyclical like that, where ironically, this primitive, lowly group that they seriously look down on, I have to, for lack of anything better, they look down on because of their religion. They still wanted exactly what those people had, but not in that way. But they wanted to live in that paradise and be there. So I thought that was kind of going off of that last Chat GPT point.
Yeah.
How it's like, okay, maybe are they missing the point? Because like you said, it seemed like their lives were perfectly fulfilled, and they were maybe not progressing, but were they not thriving, and were they not perfectly happy how they were? But
Right.
or is that Stockholm syndrome? Like, I mean,
Well,
what?
but to take kind of the extension of that, let's look at, we're all on this journey to, a theoretical retirement of sorts, kind of to your fishing analogy, right? What do we all want to do when we retire? We don't want the complexities of what we're doing from day to day. We just want to put our
Sit
feet
around
up.
and talk about Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. So we're all retired right now, is what you're telling me. Deal.
All right. Should we
Is
move
there any
on?
good trivia for this or no?
I pretty much gave it. Not
Okay.
a lot.
Then let's
Nothing,
move on.
nothing that there was just really not, other than they didn't want the paper mache dragon getting hurt.
All right. Well, let's put this episode to bed and hopefully never have to talk about it ever again.
When we do a retrospective in a couple years, when we go back and decide we're going to watch the 10 worst episodes, maybe this one will come up.
Maybe. We'll see.
All right. Now we can move on to the next strong social commentary episode of the Doomsday Machine. I thought this was another good episode. I know this is another one I think is fairly highly rated on IMDb. It looks like it's at an 8.7. I thought it was a 7. I thought it was good. Again, nothing that was like mind-blowing, I guess, but still it was a good episode. There wasn't really anything that jumps out at me as being like a negative or bad about the episode.
I agree. I also gave it a 7. I think it was a good episode. There've certainly been better ones. It held my attention the entire time. I thought it was an interesting exploration of the command style of someone other than Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Not a great commander, as we discovered, but interesting to kind of dig through that and build on that universe a little bit more. You see another ship like the Enterprise. You see another something that's happening that threatens, millions, billions of people, and kind of how they tackle that. In just kind of an action-packed episode, like fun to watch in that regard, which means Abbie hated it. She gave it a 1.
No, I actually really liked it. So this is one of the few ones I actually had seen and remembered watching, and so it was very interesting to rewatch it, actually paying attention to it, and not just having it on in the background. I thought it had everything that reminds me of Star Trek. It had the foe that was almost insurmountable. We have the captain making bold choices for his crew. We had a Commodore and that kind of like conflict of relationships there. And definitely what we would say is poor choices on things. And, kind of that conflict of the crew trying to decide, how do we deal with this? Like, we got the chain of command, but we also have a trust within our crew that we know this is incorrect. So that dynamic of how does our personal responsibility play off of our duty and our oaths to follow command, I found it just very, very believable. And though it was set in space and set with the giant earthworm tube demon thing, I found it very believable as far as the reactions that took place. I think that's something that I could watch a military show today, or watch something today and have a commander change on a or I could watch an episode of Discovery or whatever and see that happen, where a admiral comes up and takes control, and all of a sudden you're like, well, crap, we don't like any decision this guy's doing, and he's going to get us all killed. There's no trust there. So I really do believe that's something that's very consistent within the series and is very representative of this show and how that works. Overall, I enjoyed it. It was a solid episode. I mean, it feels like it wasn't very long to me. I don't know. I guess I'll give it a 7. I wouldn't actively turn it on and watch it myself just for the sake of watching it, but I do think that it was enjoyable. I liked it.
A rare consensus for us that has not happened very often.
I'm curious. You'll have to track this, Nate, of how often we get to be similar in that now that Aaron and I are watching them together.
That's true.
How much we're influencing each other's decisions because one of us will laugh at something or minor comments without really thinking about it. If that's actually making an impact to the story and to our overall interpretation to it.
Go back one episode, and I think your theory falls apart.
Yeah, but that's one data. I mean, there's 2 data points here.
I bet there's more to it than you think, Emery. But
it's fine. I was enjoying this more than you anyway. These episodes, I had all of them rated higher than, or like, on average, I was rated much higher than yours. So I'll bring you up. You'll see how great Star Trek is.
That's what I was saying. You're bringing my scores up on these, not down. So I've had 2.
Damn, I brought your score up, and you gave that last one a 2. Woo.
That one was non-redeemable. That was not, there was no redemption for the apple. But on this one and the other one, I've been scoring pretty high on these. I don't think I've scored this high since like we first started, and I felt guilty giving bad scores.
That Minnesota guilt again.
You know it. I can't get rid of it, man. You move out of the state and everything, it tracks with you.
No, that's with you for life.
So this was clearly a commentary on the Cold War, which, I mean, right in the heat of it, ironic, right in the midst of like the height of the Cold War was like right around this time. I mean, you got to think, you're what, 4 or 5 years removed from the Cuban Missile Crisis when this is going on, and there are overt references. I mean, they're saying that this weapon is a doomsday machine.
Yep.
And Kirk says it's a weapon built primarily as a bluff. It's never meant to be used. So strong it could destroy both sides in a war. Something like the old H-bomb was supposed to be. That's what I think this is. A doomsday machine that somebody used in a war uncounted years ago. They don't exist anymore, but the machine is still destroying.
And they never say it directly, but effectively mutually assured destruction.
Right.
That's what it is.
I mean, they say it's so strong it could destroy both sides in a war. I mean, it's not that it could destroy everyone in a war. It could destroy both sides. So yeah, it was just very much about that. They're kind of building that universe a bit because they're saying this came from a different galaxy. Now they just say it's apparently from another galaxy. I was going to say, I don't know where they figured that, or they're just like, nobody here would come up with that. But then to think how old that thing would have to be if it went through intergalactic travel.
Yep.
To get there. Granted, I mean, clearly they're not beholden to sublight speed, but this thing also seemed like it was just kind of plodding along. So they don't really get bogged down by those details.
And how fuel efficient it would need to be, because between galaxies, you're going a long distance without, the planets are fuel, right? They talk about it digesting and using it. And when you get into those large voids of space where there's nothing there and it keeps going, must be pretty efficient.
I don't quite recall how that Commodore kind of took control on the Enterprise, but it seems like he was in a position where he was not set up for success, in that he should not have been allowed to take that command. Well, I mean, he tried to fight it being taken away too, and then Spock was just like, you don't have to respect my authority. I don't want to have to arrest you, but I will. So maybe you just do what I say, and you can file a complaint if you want later.
But that was a great scene, because he does walk in and pull his rank, and Spock defers, like, I'm not going to break the rules, but also he says you have the right to do so. You have the right to do so, but I advise against it. And Decker says that thing must be destroyed. And Spock says, you tried to destroy it once before, Commodore. The result was a wrecked ship and a dead crew. And my response to that was, damn. Like, Spock just
He's-
lays it out, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just find it shocking that after they find him nearly dead and in shock on his ship as the only one there saying, like, I killed everybody on accident because I was trying to keep them safe and they were going to die here. So I said, go down to the planet. And then they did. And then the planet got destroyed. Like, they kind of just go over that pretty quickly, but that's like devastating. So he's in a position where he should never be allowed anywhere near command at that time. Not saying he can't ever come back, but he was not set up to make good decisions. And then, I mean, in the end, he was like, fine, if I can't destroy it with this ship, I'm going to take this shuttlecraft and try to go all, I pictured, as he was going there, I pictured, was it Randy Quaid in Independence Day when he's just like, all right, you alien assholes. And he flies up the ship, except for he failed when he did it this time, and only he blew up.
But I have two comments on that, because early in the episode, when they're over on the Constellation and they hadn't found Decker yet, but there's no crew. There's no crew, there's no bodies. And one of the comments that's made was, well, there's no way they could have beamed everybody down to the planet. Well, it turns out Decker had beamed everyone down to the planet. And so that bugged me a little bit. But then there was this other comment that he made during that very emotional scene with him and Kirk, and there's that big outburst, and Decker states that he's never lost a command. And my thought was, you've never lost a command. How often does this happen that's such a remarkable thing? How often do they lose ships that it's like, well, I guess it was my time? I mean, if you look at modern military, they don't lose ships that often. The U.S. Navy doesn't lose an aircraft carrier even every year, right? The vast majority of people that are in command of ships will go through their entire career without losing it or having a mass casualty event.
Tell me where Commodore is in terms of rank. Isn't it active?
Above captain.
So below admiral, but a step above captain?
So I think in the Starfleet world, there's captain, there's fleet captain, and then Commodore is above that. Because
Commodore goes away in
yes,
the newer stuff, and they go to admiral.
Kind of.
But I ask because, is it potentially what he meant by that of he never lost a command, meaning when he became a Commodore, he still remained active in the field. Where in, now in the current seasons or series, when you get above captain, you're no longer in charge of a ship. You're no longer in charge of a crew. And so I'm wondering if that's what his reference was. He was promoted to Commodore, but still retained his command. I've never lost a command. I keep with my people. I stay with my people. I took it as that way, but I might be misunderstanding what the rank of Commodore means overall.
I think he was basically meaning I've never got my ass kicked. Like this. I mean, he was reeling from the fact that he had 400 people relying on him. He made a decision and every single one of them died and he was still alive. And that his responsibility was to go down with his ship. And Kirk basically said, there's no point in you dying right now. It serves nothing. And they kind of come back to that, which makes so much of this a tragic story yet again. Yeah, with Decker when he took off and took the shuttlecraft and flew into it, Spock says to Kirk, "Sir, may I offer my condolences on the death of your friend. It is most regrettable." And then Kirk says it's regrettable that he died for nothing. And basically saying earlier when he was pleading with Decker to not do that, he was like, nobody expects you to die for an error in judgment. It's you made a call, given the information you had, you did something that gave your people a chance. Then things went the wrong direction. I mean,
It's not only with
you
the
picked wrong.
information, but with the resources he had.
Yeah. I mean, given what was available to you at that time, you made a decision that makes sense. The end result wasn't great, but like nobody is going to say you deserve to die for that. Um, so yeah, I thought that was again just tragic.
I really don't blame Decker for the decisions that he made prior to the Enterprise showing up.
Yeah.
But I think after that fact, he was off the rails.
Which again is why I was saying earlier, it's like he had no business being there, even when he did pull rank. He should have been, I don't know, whatever would have caused it. I mean, and you had Spock there basically watching and monitoring everything.
But Spock enabled it too, because
he allowed it.
McCoy tried to relieve him, but Spock jumps in and says, well, have you done a formal evaluation?
Have you done your exam to make your determination?
Versus, I think if he had just shut up, it probably would have been okay and nobody would have questioned it.
But then if you want to look at the results of it, they don't fly a shuttlecraft into the face of this thing, and then maybe they don't decide like, hey, let's blow up this ship, and hopefully you beam me out in time.
Yeah, that's fair.
And yet again, we had our third straight episode with major transporter issues. I'm beginning to think maybe Scotty isn't so great at his job.
He's a
no, transporters are just not good. Like, think of like even McCoy in the first movie, Nate. Do you remember what he says? Do you remember what happens?
Yep, I remember.
He refuses to beam up. He's like, that's it. I've had enough of these shitty transporters. McCoy finally admits it. In this is like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going on that stupid thing. It's just going to kill me. Which, it's true. They have 3 seasons of setting up McCoy to be like, I'm lucky I'm still alive after going on that stupid transporter. So I think that's definitely a running theme, Aaron, that you keep going through all of the series, that it's like transporters are a hit or miss on that.
So we talk about hopefully beaming him out in time. One of the things that did bug me a little bit was, Kirk was going to stay behind on the Constellation and, pilot her for as long as he could and then beam out at the last second. And he tells Scotty, you're going back to the Enterprise. And Scotty's like, cool, I'm out. And I don't know. I feel like the Scotty I know would have been like, no, I'm staying with you. And he still probably would have left, like Kirk would have forced him out. But there's no hesitation. It's just like, good luck. Get me out of here. Like, I'm leaving. Have fun. That bugged me a little bit. I don't know if anyone caught that or not, but
I didn't. But yeah.
Abbie, I cut you off. What were you trying to say?
No, I was just going to say, we talk about, we're like, well, he didn't have to drive the shuttle into the middle of the planet eater. Please don't die. It's like, I'm sorry. You also just yelled at this guy for trying to kill your ship. Like, dude, what are you doing what are you doing over there? Well, I took command. Why? Give it back to Spock. Get off my bridge. Like, he literally just finished yelling at him. And then you're shocked this guy ends up in a shuttlecraft and like tries to kill himself after everyone he had responsibility for is gone. Like, do we have 0 counselors or 0 mental health professionals anywhere in Star Trek at this point, which is just like crazy to me. And then the other thing that I have a big takeaway on all these for is at least we're learning from all of this wild west mistakes on stuff. Like, we have security on our transporters now. We have security on our shuttle bays. Like, my goodness, we lock our cars for goodness sake, but we don't lock a shuttlecraft, which, things like that.
I'm sure they just left the keys on the tire though to make it easy when somebody had to take it out.
Oh, they're up on
under the visor.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and even down to like standard practices and stuff like that. I think in like future series, they point out like, no, that was a traumatic event. You have a mandatory 10 days off. You cannot be in command until you're evaluated. You can't go back to work until you're evaluated. So it's kind of interesting. It's still kind of that
But
wild west that way, but
I guess
it's interesting to me.
in that regard, though, that's kind of in an ideal scenario. I mean, as ideal as it can be, losing your entire crew. But in an ideal scenario, you're like, hey, we are now removed from this threat that was facing us, and now we can take time to get well. And instead, it was like, hey, let's take some time to get, oh shit, it's there. And it's going to kill us again. So they were kind of forced into it and didn't have the time to even recover from the last attack. Now, maybe I missed, but that I how did that thing sneak up on them? Was it like in and out and like disappearing and warping away
Yeah.
and then coming back? I mean, it's like, okay, so it got rid of number 4. What happened to planet 5? And then 6, and it was clearly following a pretty clear progression. And I did hear them say something about next it was going to go to the Rigel system,
Yep.
which I mean, we heard about Rigel 7 at least in the cage, and I'm not sure if that came up again at all. But does that mean, so thinking back to that episode, when we hear Rigel 7, is that like the 7th planet in that system? So like on Earth, we would be like Sol 3.
In general, yes, it's the system and then the number of planet. That's what they've kind of established. But to your point, like they obviously knew what direction it was going. And they mentioned that it's headed towards the highest population density area of the galaxy. And to me, it went back to Operation Annihilate, where again you've got this something is moving from system to system and making people go mad, and we're shocked when it suddenly appears somewhere. This is again like we've watched this thing destroy all these planets and move through the galaxy, and we're shocked that it's happening here and that it's snuck up on us. Like there's no pattern here. Like you guys didn't figure this out. One of the things I wrote down that I thought of, most of the way through the episode was Commodore Decker insane before the episode or because of it? Because he was nuts, right? By the end of it.
Right. Certifiably, I don't think that's in dispute.
Yeah. I would say he seemed almost like shell-shocked. Based on what had happened, and maybe I missed context clues to his prior command or his prior style, but it would seem like he was in a state of shell shock where he had some serious survivor's guilt because he was the one in charge who made a decision. Everybody else died except for him. That's going to do a number on anybody. And then he was forced back into it, or he forced himself back into it, and was allowed back into the fight, then in a position where he could make some decisions that could again radically impact a whole bunch of people. And he was then clearly making horrendous decisions like, hey, this didn't work when we tried to shoot it before, but maybe if we try shooting it again, and then doing those things and doubling down on his bad decisions. But I would think it seems to be that it would have been a result of what he and his ship and crew had been through and seen versus kind of something that was a trend for him, because I get the feeling he would not have been long for any command if that was his command style.
Yeah. And I agree. That's kind of where I went with it too. It was just an interesting, because we don't know, right? We didn't see anything. We don't know anything about this character prior to this episode, but he's certifiable, right?
Other than Kirk seems to have known him and wasn't like, man, can you believe that guy?
So I
mean, Kirk wasn't looking at it, or Kirk didn't seem to be like, yeah, Decker, that checks out.
Yeah. I'm gonna steal some of Abbie's trivia potentially, because as I was watching this, I went, Decker, that sounds familiar.
It
Because
does.
in the motion picture, the captain of the Enterprise is a guy named Captain Decker.
His son?
And
Hold on,
yeah,
Kirk's not the captain of the Enterprise in the motion picture?
No.
not
The
initially.
5-year mission is over.
Yeah. He's an admiral. He's
He's
working at
been,
Starfleet headquarters.
yeah, he's got
Um,
promoted.
but
Oh,
I thought,
spoilers. Damn.
yeah, dang it. I thought that was really interesting. And so I went looking to see like if there's any relation or if that was a coincidence. And yeah, Abbie, you nailed it. It is the son of Commodore Decker, but they never say it in the movie. It was a part of the script, but none of that actually made it to filming, which I think is a missed opportunity of and another kind of conflict between Kirk and Decker of you were around when my dad died kind of thing. But it was not a coincidence that his
Crazy.
Decker. So
That's interesting. I do like that. I like
well, it's the first
continuity and
movie.
storyline.
I know it gets hated on a lot. It's a great movie.
I really do. I honestly think that might be my favorite of the Star Trek movies.
Really?
I
Not
I
my
really
favorite,
no,
but I like it a
no,
lot.
I say that because I haven't seen it in so long, and I just remember it being so good.
I am
Now,
such a
Wrath of Khan
nerd.
obviously is epic, but I would say even the newest movies really can't hold a candle to some of those original movies as far as it goes. But now I have not seen them in probably 25 years. So watch them again, maybe I'll be like, oh, it's not as good as I remember. But I just remember it being really kind of awing, like, oh, maybe it's because comparison to the actual show, and like the movie was grandiose. I don't
It
know.
was.
I'm excited to get to them.
I'm such a nerd that I actually saw the motion picture in the theaters when they re-released it for the 40th anniversary. So they actually
Okay.
like I went pre-COVID, obviously. It came out in 79, so 2019. I went by myself because nobody wanted to go with me. But it's one of the ones I hadn't seen in the theater before, and they were showing it, and I wanted to go see it. It was incredible.
I'm not gonna judge for going and seeing old movies in the theater. I dragged Abbie to Jurassic Park in 3D the night that opened because I was so excited to go see it.
I can't argue with that. I mean,
And I had
you're
we
wearing the t-shirt for it too, so
I certainly am. And I had a couple months ago when they re-released Return of the Jedi in theaters for the 40th anniversary. I didn't realize it was coming out until too late, and we weren't able to find a babysitter. But I did want to go to that,
I mean,
so
there's something to be said for
I
that,
won't
right?
judge.
I saw every movie from Star Trek 6 on in the theaters because that's when I was old enough to do it. To go to those. And so now it's kind of like making up for the ones that I haven't. But I really enjoyed it.
I would
And
have gone with you, Nate, had I known you.
what's that?
I would have gone with you had I known you then.
You knew me in
4
2019.
years ago.
Okay, I didn't know you were going without me, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I just went. It was great. I didn't even think to even invite you. I just
He was
went.
ashamed
Probably.
That sounds about right.
because none of us knew you were a Trekkie.
Sure.
Me? That's probably accurate.
No, Nate.
Oh.
Everyone knows I'm a Trekkie. I don't hide that well.
So, yeah, I think that's most of what I had for this episode. It was good. It was good. It was again just kind of had that tragedy to it of like not all of these have happy endings, even though it's a good ending that they destroy this doomsday machine and they have the conversation saying like, oh, well, I hope that's the only one. I mean, um, but yeah. Yeah, it was a good episode. Yeah, Abbie, did you give a rating for that? Oh yeah, we had consensus. We were all
Yeah.
at 7.
We're all at 7.
All thought it was good.
Was there any other trivia for this one? I know I kind of stole some thunder there, but anything interesting there before I do Chat GPT?
You do Chat GPT first. I haven't actually looked at the trivia. I'll look it up right now.
Again, just like the Apple, I don't think I'm going to read word for word all of this. The threat of technology, it explores the dangers of unchecked technological power. So I think we kind of hit on that in a different way when we talk about the Cold War and nuclear weapons and things like that, right? Of it being an unchecked technological advancement and mutually assured destruction and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the way they describe it is like it wasn't unchecked. It was that there were other things there, and the people that developed it are likely long destroyed, but then the weapon survived and kind of, at least they lost control of it. But
yeah, my perception is they were likely destroyed by their own weapon.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't know, but that was, I think, the conclusion they were working towards.
That's what they were insinuating.
Yeah. The second one is the ethics of weapons in warfare. Raises ethical questions about the use of weapons and the nature of warfare. Captain Kirk and his crew encounter Commodore Decker, who becomes obsessed with destroying the Doomsday machine at any cost, even if it means sacrificing innocent lives. This highlights the ethical dilemma of making difficult choices in times of war and whether the ends justify the means. I don't know that I agree with that last statement, because if anything else, Decker was subscribed to the theory of, we hear it a lot, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, right? He was willing to sacrifice his ship, the Enterprise, anything to prevent...
To save the galaxy.
Yeah, to prevent it from even moving on to Rigel, right? Like, just that sacrifice was worth it in order to save however many people were in the Rigel system.
But at the same time, I think that comment from ChatGPT is assuming that he's acting rationally and not just as a reaction and being like way off his game.
Yeah. Then there's human determination and courage, showcases the indomitable spirit of humanity in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. This is, I feel like, every episode of Star Trek. The nature of fear, it explores the theme of fear and its impact on decision making. I think that's a great point. Raises the question about the role of fear in shaping human behavior and the importance of rationality and composure in times of crisis. We've talked about that a lot, specifically as it relates to Kirk and his composure in times of crisis versus, in this episode, it's the contrast of that. It's Decker and his lack of composure in times of crisis. Which kind of a cool way of looking at it. It's a little different than normal. And then the last one is the power of sacrifice. The episode examines the theme of sacrifice for a greater good. Commodore Decker, driven by his determination to stop the Doomsday machine, sacrifices himself and his crew to accomplish this goal. This raises philosophical questions about the ethics of self-sacrifice, the value of individual lives, and the notion of heroism. The hero's journey, Aaron.
Yeah, but I don't think he sacrificed his crew.
Not intentionally.
He tried to save his crew and they died anyway. He just didn't save them. And I mean, even then, his sacrifice having any value seems to have been an accident, because the initial thought was like he died and it did nothing. And then they realized, like, okay, no, it showed that we just need a hell of a lot bigger explosion to do the damage. So even then, it was like he didn't need to be sacrificed for them to realize a shuttlecraft isn't going to do the trick.
Yeah.
But maybe something bigger will. So yeah, I don't think that hits it quite right.
Yeah, it's definitely imperfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a
Still interesting to see what possible interpretations of some of these things could be, because it would be very easy for somebody to look at this and say like, oh yes, exactly this, but then we can come in and say, I don't think so. And in that parallel universe, they're saying, could you imagine that somebody would disagree with this? You were on mute.
So some trivia. I'm not on mute, am I?
Nate was.
I am. I apparently can't hit the button, so.
Okay, so some trivia for us. So you guys notice those little cassette tapes that Decker's playing with while sitting in the chair?
Yep.
Deliberate choice, because it mirrors, I guess, Humphrey Bogart in a movie he was just in, where he did that with like ball bearings. So not only did they have him do that and like play with those cassette cartridges, which was very noticeable, the colors of them are the colors that he wears and Kirk wears to help like subliminally show you the conflict they're
Yellow
having.
and green?
Huh?
It was yellow
Yep.
and green? I did
Yeah.
not catch that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that was supposed to be subtle, but a thing. This actually won a award, a Hugo Award in 1968 at the World Science Fiction Convention. So, or was nominated at least. I don't know if it actually won. I should say it was nominated. But hey, we're actually getting nominations here. And we were talking about the other Constellation class starships. The other ones, if you're interested, are the Hood, Potemkin, Excalibur, Lexington, the Defiant, and Exeter. I've heard of at least the Potemkin, the Hood, and the Defiant, but I don't think I heard about them as Constitution class. So I think I heard about them later on. So it's really interesting that those same names travel through. I just find that fascinating and like so much a part of the lore that just stays so true. Other than that, it's a lot of books were written off of this episode. It was very much a popular episode. There was a great blooper from Leonard Nimoy on this one. Apparently, it shows up on all the blooper reels, where the line is where Spock's talking to Decker. He goes, "If you don't veer off, I shall relieve you on that basis." But Leonard forgot his second part of the line, so he goes, "If you don't veer off, I shall blow my brains out." So,
Perfect.
Mr. Nimoy, being amazing, like always.
Love.
Yeah, they just kind of have some random stuff on there. A lot of reference to Space Odyssey, things like that, other movies that this was kind of taking some flavor from, things like that, new books that were down off of it. But and then obviously there's like the people who catch the filming issues, like there's two computer stations, and all of a sudden there's one computer station, there's two again, and there's one, that kind of stuff, but nothing that was really awe-inspiring.
There is one thing I noticed, and I forgot about it until right now, and I closed my damn notes already. Let me make sure. Is this episode? Yeah. Where the hell is Uhura? Abbie, you're mute.
She wasn't in the last one either. She nor Chekhov.
And it was, that's one thing, but they literally had somebody else sitting at that station that was main cast, as it were, like they were talking to her, and she had an integral part of the episode, and she was just, it wasn't Uhura, she's just gone. And so I caught that like pretty much right away. But that was interesting. And we go from the other thing I forgot about was in the Apple, Kirk threatens to fire Scotty if he doesn't get the warp engines back online.
Yeah.
And in this episode, he tells Scotty that he just earned his pay for the week. Just thought those two little lines together were kind of fun in back-to-back episodes.
So Scotty's basically a contract worker who's constantly having to prove his worth.
Exactly. Get your shit together or you don't get paid.
His transporters keeps malfunctioning. I'm pretty
say,
sure he's just on a pip.
Yet Kirk keeps using the transporter.
Right? Should know by now. So,
I do see, looking at IMDb here, it says the ending of this episode where Decker rams a starship down the middle of the machine to disable it might have served as inspiration for a similar maneuver in the film Independence Day.
Oh, look at that. We actually pulled that one full circle, didn't we?
Yep.
Love it.
Oh, so yeah.
Cool.
All right. So
Oh.
three more episodes next week.
Yep.
All right.
Can't wait. Should be interesting. I'm looking at the titles.
Yeah, let's.
Cat Spa, I Mud, and Metamorphosis. Interesting.
And it looks like Cat's Paw and Metamorphosis were the first two in terms of season 2 production, even though they weren't aired until 7th and 9th. And then I Mud was the let's see, 11th or the 41st overall episode done.
37th aired then, roughly.
Yeah. So yeah, they go kind of all over the place, just like in season 1, having them kind of all over in terms of order.
I know Next Generation really wasn't any different.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a thing that we'll see for a while.
Yep. But I mean, since it's not so serialized, it's not like it really matters.
Yep.
But
sure.
Yeah. Couple good episodes and one not so good episode this week, but still had some good conversation from all of it, which yeah, another enjoyable time.
I agree.
Well, there you go. I can't get the thought out of my mind that Kirk unilaterally condemned an entire society to death. And why? As captain, Kirk has many responsibilities. First, there is his mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations. Second, he's responsible for the safety of his ship and crew. Which brings us to Gamma Trianguli 6. We've found a new world with a new, to us, albeit old, civilization. There's a mandate to not interfere, right? But then the Enterprise is trapped by something from the planet, and the ship and crew are now at risk. McCoy says the non-interference directive does not apply because the society has not changed in a long time and has become stagnant. To save the Enterprise, Kirk instructs them to destroy Vol, thereby freeing the ship, and freeing, if you can call it that, the feeders of Vol. But freeing them to what? Experience death? I believe that meaning is derived from limits. A game has meaning because there are rules within which we play. Life has meaning because our experience of time is finite. But what if we are wrong? What if we ascribe meaning to our limitations because that is our experience? What if, in their own view, the feeders of Vol had meaningful lives which were now going to be limited by the destruction of Vol? Kirk presented it as though they have been freed. They could now experience many of the things that provide meaning to humanity. But what if Kirk is wrong? He condemned a society to death. As McCoy said, it was to, quote, put those people back on a normal course of social evolution, unquote. That just doesn't sit right with me. Set a society on the right path by unilaterally condemning them to death and then what? Just leave? I wouldn't personally want the lives of the feeders of Vol, but whose choice is it to determine how they live? To be fair, Kirk didn't completely leave them. He said they would learn to care for themselves, quote, with our help. But is it truly freedom if it is imposed? In the episode, they reference the fall of Adam and Eve from the Genesis story in the Bible. In that story, Adam and Eve were lied to by the serpent, but they chose to eat the fruit. While the episode tries to make a moral equivalence, I don't think it's quite the same. The feeders of Vol didn't choose to destroy Vol. Kirk did. I feel like this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Let me check my notes. Okay. Yeah. In Return of the Archons, after destroying the computer Landru, Kirk said, "You're on your own now. I hope you're up to it." The apple had a similar feel. It was as if Kirk said, "You didn't ask for this, but here you go anyway. Good luck, Kirk. Out." I don't know. Maybe there aren't clean answers to these questions. And maybe that's okay. If everything was straightforward and simple, it wouldn't be interesting. So here, we have a show where we can explore these issues, and even in the not-so-great episodes, we can find ideas worth discussing. And with that, I want to thank you all again for joining us on our voyage through Star Trek. If you are watching along, next time we will watch the next 3 episodes of Season 2 of the original series, Cat's Paw, I, Mud, and Metamorphosis. As always, if you like what we're doing here, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. For Abbie and Nate, this is Aaron reminding you to never give up, never surrender. What took me out of the episode is so minimal, but just kind of fun to talk about and laugh about. But all in all, I thought it was a really good episode. Yeah, very enjoyable.